Welcome everyone to CVI Now's live virtual event. Today we'll explore CVI and literacy, really exploring a dual media approach to literacy. We've had such rich conversations here in our CVI Now group about all the various pathways to literacy for our kids with CVI. If you're with us on our CVI Now parent group, drop a hello in the comments and feel free to post questions as they come to you. I'm Rachel Bennett, the Assistant Director for CVI Now and Parent Advocacy and Support here at the CVI Center at Perkins, and I'm a CVI mom to Henry. I am so excited for today's conversation with Tammy Reisman, who is one of my favorite people in the whole entire world. Tammy is a TVI and has a strong background in the education of students with vision impairments and is highly skilled at comprehensively assessing and implementing a literacy approach for her students. She believes every student is a reader and a writer and a problem solver, and the pathway will just look different. Tammy is also the program coordinator for the Vision Studies program at UMass Boston and teaches 3 courses in the program, right? 3? Yeah. All the things. As some of you may know, UMass Boston is the first TVI program that included a mandatory semester-long course about CVI and the only institution that has a CVI graduate certificate program. Tammy's leadership has been instrumental in all of this. So our format today will be a conversation format. I have a lot of questions to ask Tammy. We'll talk for about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll look forward to answering the questions that you post in the comments. So welcome, everyone. You ready, Tammy? Ready to go? So this is so exciting.
I'm ready.
Okay. So you say over and over again that every child with CVI can be a reader, a writer, a problem solver. No child is too anything to keep them from being able to learn. Tell me more about your core beliefs.
So really it comes down to that I feel very strongly that literacy is a human right. We talk about other things that are important and that are human rights, but literacy is definitely one of them up there. So I think it's critical to make sure that we are teaching all children with visual impairments the best way that they can learn. And there's always a way to reach them. And I feel like it's up to us as educators to figure out that way, to find that way to teach literacy skills to kids, regardless of their additional disabilities or their complex needs or what else might be going on. And usually, a lot of that is done in collaboration. I mean, we're not islands. We should be working with other people. We should be working with general education teachers, literacy and specialists, and just other people on the team.
Yeah. What does literacy mean to you?
So literacy, to me, when I think about literacy, I think about communication. I think about engagement to the environment, engagement to other people in the environment. I think about self-esteem. I mean, when kids start to learn not just literacy, but any skills, their self-esteem just soars. Like they believe they can do anything. Literacy also means kids seeing themselves as readers. And no matter what you're doing with them, if no matter what level they're at, if you're teaching these skills and you're having these expectations, these high expectations, and then they start to see themselves as readers, no matter how they're reading or what they're reading initially, it's just really exciting. Mm-hmm. Literacy is equality and it's access. I mean, every child, every individual, everyone deserves equal access to literacy instruction. And like I said before, it's up to us with the whole team to figure out how that can happen. And it's just how we interact with the world around us.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty big. So I hear the terms universal literacy and functional literacy. Can you describe both and the difference between them?
Sure. So I think of universal literacy similar to the Universal Design for Learning, UDL. Just that with and this is my own thoughts about it, my own definition, but really you're finding ways to reach all students of all abilities and finding ways to differentiate that instruction around literacy and how to teach them. It's never a one size fits all. You don't just hear of one strategy or one method and say, okay, you have this disability or you have that diagnosis. This is how you need to learn. It's really figuring out what is the right way for that individual student. And it could be, sometimes it's just a few different methods all at once, and you kind of mix things together and you use them all together. It may not just be one tool that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I think of one student who was really with a pretty significant seizure disorder and a significant visual impairment due to CVI. She really, was having trouble, seeing standard print. She was having trouble seeing anything that was two-dimensional and really needed everything three-dimensional. Mm-hmm. So the more I assessed her and the more I got to know her, we realized that she really needed, a tactile approach to learning. And at that time, standard Braille just wasn't working for the student either. So we just started with tactile symbols, and every tactile symbol, we created one that would be a certain vocabulary word. And then all of a sudden, some of the Braille started clicking, and she started to connect the Braille words with the tactile symbols. But then all of a sudden, something started happening visually, and then there were these print words that were connecting with both the Braille and the tactile symbols. And it didn't happen overnight. It was a slow process, but it happened. And it's just a matter of figuring out how that can happen for an individual student.
Why do you think that happened for that student?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I really feel like in a lot of the work I've been doing with a lot of different kids, mm-hmm. Something about that, that brain connection and using those tactile skills also did something to do something with her visual system, and it just kind of all clicked. And I think part of it too was she was in this safe environment, and she realized that she was learning to read and literacy was coming to her. And then, because at the same time, when I say she couldn't see things, she would look at things and she just didn't trust herself that what she was seeing was accurate, and that she wasn't being accurate. And then she became more self-confident and she took risks, and she mm-hmm. said, well, if that says mom, does that say mom? And then instead of questions, then it became more and more statements. She became more and more sure of herself. And I just think just very slowly, I think a lot of it was, her self-confidence coming into play. And just like I said before, that the belief in herself as a learner, as a reader, it's just a lot of things I think that connected all at once.
It's everything. And that she had multiple options to verify what she thinks that she knows.
Yes.
Instead of just being anxious about seeing something and just, it's not coming, the recognition or whatever is not coming, but being able to have lots of bridges to that perception.
Yeah.
So interesting. The brain is wild. And I'm just learning how it just, reading neuroscience articles all the time, just how interconnected everything is. If there's anxiety, if there's a self-esteem issue, there's an emotional issue, that's highly going to impact, visual processing and so much. So,
and I think it's been a problem for so many years where we have these kids with different complex needs, or that have maybe what are called cognitive impairments or intellectual disabilities. And there's not those high expectations that they can learn. And
right.
And then it gets into that. You asked me about functional literacy. So traditionally, in special education, people would kind of give up on these kids, and they would say, let's just do functional literacy with them, which meant we'll just teach them how to read recipes. We'll teach them how to read a label. We'll teach them how to read signs in the community. We'll teach them how to read their name, maybe their family members' names. That's what traditionally functional literacy used to mean. And it really was lumped with these kids in special education who had complex needs or severe disabilities. And we've kind of evolved from that. I think the field of special education is trying to get away from that functional literacy thought.
Okay.
And that mindset. And now we're thinking more of it as just access to all media. That's what functional literacy is, having that access and thinking about how all learners, regardless of their abilities, regardless of their other complex needs, they need functional literacy to just engage in all activities that in every environment around them.
Yeah.
And it could be, yes, it could be seeing those community signs. It could be seeing the numbers in an elevator. But it's also a part of, accessing something on the computer, or even using their, auditorily listening to something that's happening. And that's all a part of literacy media and learning media.
Yeah. Yeah. Takes on many forms. So we see all of these reading readiness checklists. I keep hearing about them. I mean, I've been told in the past about Henry, like, oh, he's not ready for reading because of this, this, and this. How do we know when our kids with CVI are ready for literacy?
So this goes back to my core beliefs. There shouldn't be a readiness checklist. All kids are ready for literacy right from the get-go, regardless of any other disabilities that they might have. And I strongly believe, even if they aren't ready to start that, I guess you could call conventional literacy program, they should be exposed to all forms of literacy immediately. They should be exposed to teaching the way all kids are being taught, even kids who have more complex needs. And you have reading groups that are happening in different grades. All kids should be a part of a reading group, and they should be exposed to higher level thinking and some of the higher level books that are out there. And time again, I just see kids in high school who are still reading Sesame Street books, for example. And that's great if that's what the kids really like, but they also need exposure to grade level books. And it's so easy to adapt and modify every single book out there to meet the needs of individuals.
It is. It's easy.
It's easy.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that question so you can walk us through it. When you say immediately, are you talking about, right when our kids are born? Are you talking about when they enter preschool in terms of literacy?
Well, yeah, right when kids are born. I mean, you start reading to your kids, you start showing them things. And if a child is blind, then you start talking them through things. Those are all different forms of literacy.
Right.
But then, yes, once they get into a formal education in preschool, they should be doing what the general education curriculum is doing for all the preschoolers. And I know at preschool, they're not necessarily doing a formal literacy program, but they still have something in place for all kids. And all kids should be a part of that. You shouldn't assume that, they're not going to get it. It's too hard for them or it's too challenging for them. We should assume that they will get something out of it and that they will start learning with the other kids. And then as we see what's happening, then we make adjustments, but we don't give up. We just keep teaching them.
You make it sound. I know. And that's why you're so magical, Tammy. Okay. So let's talk about a dual media approach to literacy. Really break this down for us. What is it?
So the first thing I'll say is that I truly believe that all learners are dual media learners, regardless of visual impairment status or, abilities or disabilities, because think about us as readers. We read standard print. We listen to things on a computer. We listen to things on the radio. We might listen to someone read something out loud. We listen to these webinars. So that's different kinds of media that we're taking in right there. So all learners are dual media learners, and it just looks differently for individual kids. And some kids might be learning print, but they also might need Braille for whatever reason. Some kids might access things more auditorily, but they still might be using print to access some work and Braille to go along with it. Some kids, depending on their fine motor skills or any motor skills, may be doing more with tactile symbols initially before they actually get to some of that standard Braille or even some of that standard print. So it's just, that's what I mean. It's literally using different media to teach kids in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So how do you figure this out? Like, how do you assess a child with CVI and figure out, what their appropriate media is and how to teach them?
So it's a lot of observation, and it's the learning media assessment. And that's the core of what we do as TVIs. And I really believe in the learning media assessment. I feel like that's what helps us drive decisions in the programming for kids and in their media decisions. And, a learning media assessment done accurately, takes hours. You want to observe in as many different environments as possible. It's not something that you could do in 30 minutes and say, okay, I know the kid. Done. They can only do things auditorily. They'll never do any, it's really looking at every environment and what makes sense for them. And that includes quiet environments, busier environments, talking to families. That's critical. What are they doing at home? What's important to the family? Some families, it's really important for them to have their kids learn some print in some way. And some might say, I really want them to learn Braille, or, you just have to listen to that as well. But really, it's a lot of observation. It's doing, different assessments. I use 5 or 6 different pieces of different tools, including, I really like the 2D image assessment by Matt Tejan.
Yeah.
I like his whole complexity framework. I just look at how kids are seeing things in their environment, what behaviors they're showing me visually. And I look at how are they really exploring items in their environment? Are they doing it more tactually? Are they doing it more visually? Are they using a combination of all 3 senses, or is it mostly 2 senses? And then, a lot of times, sometimes it's cut and dry and right away that's what you have to do. But most of the time, it's some experimenting, and you just try different things with kids. And when I say try different things, I'll stick with something for a few weeks at least to see if it's working. And then sometimes it's working, and sometimes it needs something else added to it, or sometimes I need to change what I'm thinking. But it's not easy. It doesn't. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, exactly. Our kids take thoughtfulness and evaluation. Tell me about the tools that you use. You said you mentioned you use parts of tools for the learning media assessment.
I do. So I use the standard, learning media assessment with some updated modifications from Koenig and Holbrook. That's kind of our, for lack of a better word, that's like one of our Bible tools. In the field, I use the essential assessment tools from Texas School for the Blind. It's just done a really nice job of bringing together functional vision, learning media assessment, and some things to think about for CVI. And it came out a couple years ago. It just does a really nice job of that. I use the 2D image assessment with kids. And in fact, I like it so much that I don't only use it with my students with CVI, I use it with all kids for assessments now, because it's just a really nice tool.
Wow, that's a compliment to Matt. That's great.
I use what's the complexity framework. I take bits from the Teach CVI. And if it's appropriate, I might use some stuff from the from the range. It just depends on the student. I mean, the thing with all students, and especially kids with CVI, there's such a range of them, and they're all so individual. Some tools aren't the right tool for them, and that's partly what you have to do to figure out. And that's why I very rarely use all of one tool, because I'll start using something and I'll think, oh, that's just not the right one for them.
It's not working.
So then I might move to a different.
Yeah, which is why we just need a whole suite of tools for our kids.
We do.
When you observe students, you talked about, how they explore and how they engage with their environment and the task in front of them. A lot of our kids with CVI really fool educators that they're really looking and using their vision when they're using other compensatory skills. How do you notice those? Like, what are your tricks? How do you see through it all?
So, one thing I do is, I'll give you an example of something that recently happened. So I was asked to evaluate a new student who has a new diagnosis of CVI. And I was watching him do some work, and I just noticed that he was really struggling doing this one particular task. And he looked like he was looking, but he really wasn't looking. And I felt like when he was writing is what he was doing. But he was using the pencil, but yet he was feeling the motion with his hand, the back of his hand. It was almost like a motor kind of memory kind of a thing. So I asked him to tell me what he was doing. And he said he was trying to write his name. And then I said, well, tell me what you're seeing on the paper right now. And he said, I don't really see anything. And I said, well, tell me about what you're trying to write. And he said, I'm trying to write my name, and I'm trying to write these sentences that the teacher wanted me to write. So then I asked him what his favorite color was, and he said it was orange. So I made an orange box, and I said, okay, now tell me what you see. And he said, I see an orange box. I said, okay, write your name in that orange box. And he did, like, really quickly. And then I said, now tell me how you think I could help you to write these few sentences that you need to write. And he said, can you do the orange box again for these sentences? And not only that, he was using a pencil, and I had him switch to a colored pencil, and that made a huge difference as well. So what I'm finding, and I'm not going to generalize in saying that all kids, but there definitely have been a few kids that I've worked with that really do better with color versus black and white, and just using color to write, using color to read.
Yeah. I've been hearing that from others with CVI. Even there's an adult with CVI who talked about the only way they could get through math is color coding every symbol in the math problem. So when their vision, when they're not able to recognize it, or it gets blurry, or, as they're actively trying to solve the problem, they just remember that the 4 is green. And so they just follow the green. It's color coding just seems like a really big compensatory strategy for some.
I think it really is.
It's so powerful.
But again, noticing what compensatory, it's like it's observing. And that's just really, you just have to really practice observing. It takes practice. It's hard.
I see.
To be a skilled observer, and you miss things sometimes. And that's why I always go back.
Yeah. You got to know CVI. You got to know visual impairment. You got to know all of that.
Exactly.
With the learning media assessment, there is some expectation for some that, functional vision can improve with CVI. How do you take that into account for some of your students when thinking about learning media?
So, yes, that's true. But, it's interesting. I keep thinking about this over and over again, and I don't know if it's that it will improve, or that you're just putting the right accommodations in place for them to use their vision more efficiently. And I keep playing around with this. But I just feel like if you if I strongly believe that if you have them use other compensatory skills that they can, it never takes away from them using their vision, and for that vision to develop the best way that it can.
Yeah.
I think actually it enhances it. And I've seen that in every
Yeah.
single student that I've worked with.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like I always say that it's not a use it or lose it thing. I feel like that's kind of old ideas about the brain. There's such new research coming out, first about how highly integrated the dorsal and ventral streams are, but then how integrated the visual system is to other sensory systems.
Yes.
And you see that like actively as you're on the front lines working with students, and how such a multi-sensory approach can be a bridge to vision use, can be just a general bridge to access and learning. Because, I know with Henry and, other families have said this and other adults have said this, like vision is not reliable 24/7, whether it's huge swaths of the day or even moments. What options are we providing for our kids to make sure that they have access to any situation in life and school? It's about building that agency, right?
It's building that agency. It's also letting them have choices. And I go back to that one student that I talked about. That started with tactile symbols, and she is reading print, but her eyes get exhausted after 10 minutes of reading. And then she goes back to her tactile skills, but she still never gives up. She still wants to look at things.
Yeah.
She wants to read. But she knows that if she gets tired, she can go to her Braille, or she knows she can go to her tactile symbols, and that's another tool for her, or she can just listen if she just needs to completely relax everything.
Yeah.
And I think kids need those choices, just like all kids. Kids without disabilities have so many choices, and our kids need those choices.
They do. You're right.
They do. And they also need to be able to, in their own way, make those choices. And they need to know, this is when I use print. This is when I can use Braille, if that's what they're using, if that's it's been taught. This is when I know I can go to something audio. And they eventually learn that. I mean, again, none of this happens overnight, but it's everything you have to really think about carefully.
Yeah, and it's a form of self-determination and self-advocacy as well. Yeah. There's a parent who wrote an article for CVI Now. Her daughter in 4th grade, is reading, but her daughter said that after 2 paragraphs, it feels like her eyes are being pulled out from the center. Isn't that just, it's, and I see that in Henry, and other people see that in our kids who can't tell us, how visually fatiguing certain things are, and that this, she is a voracious reader through audiobooks. She can listen at like a crazy high speed, and, I know it's just really wonderful. Like you said, we all have choices, so our kids should too.
They definitely should. Yeah. And then that's the other thing you talked about. So kids that can't necessarily communicate to us right away, sometimes they might seem to shut down, or they might refuse something. And then you get into this, they're so behavioral. They're not listening. And I have to tell you, that really drives me a little.
Say more. I know this about you. Say more.
Well, to me, behavior always means communication. So it's up to us to figure out, why is he reacting that way? Or why did she do that? And to figure that out. And there's always a reason. There's always, some kids just can't communicate that to you right away or in a conventional sense. So we have to really look at that.
Yeah. Okay. So how then do families and school teams know when it's time to introduce another learning media?
I would say when you're not seeing progress in what they're currently doing, when they seem to be shutting down, when there might be a change in how they're responding to something. I mean, there should be constant progress monitoring. There should be constant data collection to see how they're progressing, how kids are accessing everything. And, really the learning media assessment should be done on an ongoing basis to really make sure that.
Like during every evaluation year, or as needed?
I mean, I do it even off evaluation years, just
Yeah.
informally, just in the back of my head, so I know if there's a change or not. And I just, sometimes there's changes
Yeah,
that you just want to document or keep in the back of your head.
absolutely. I was talking with a few parents who have older kids, and who say, they're reading print, but it's really hard, and they get really tired, and it's harder for them as the words get longer and there's more on a page. And considering, is Braille an option? Do we try another path? Like how do parents start this? If this is what they're seeing, how do they talk to their teams? Like, what's needed?
I mean, parents can ask for, a team meeting anytime they want.
Mm-hmm.
And also keep in mind, first of all, it doesn't matter how old a child is. You're never too old to learn Braille or to learn another media, even if it's not Braille. So you can always think about that. And then second of all, in the IDEA, there is a law that says every student with a diagnosed visual impairment will learn Braille until it's assessed that it won't be the case for an individual student. So sometimes when I see things that just says Braille is not appropriate or Braille will never be appropriate, I don't really like that wording. Because I don't know, that just seems kind of negative to me. So, I'd rather see something like Braille is not happening at this time, or, is not being taught at this time. But I feel like really request the learning media assessment, share your observations. If you're noticing this severe eye fatigue, if you're noticing that they really seem to be more tactual, if there's been any kind of changes, from the eye doctor reports, talk to your team. And I think it can be hard. And I know there's great shortages of TVIs nationwide, so it's so hard.
It's hard. The system is not working for so many of our kids.
It's hard. That's part of the problem too, is the grave shortages that we're experiencing, and we're working on recruiting. We're trying to make it better, but
I know you are.
It's tough. But we've gotten a lot of referrals. If there are paraprofessionals, people are encouraging them to apply to become TVIs. Other people in the field, we get people in all different kinds of fields. We get parents who apply to the program. So I love it. If you think it's something you want to do to help all kids.
I love her recruiting that right now. Yes, become a TVI for our kids. So talk to me about a current student who you're teaching both print and Braille to. What does that look like on a daily basis? How does the whole team on board? A lot of people are like, is there enough time to do both? It's not possible, things like that.
So, there is enough time to do both. But the other thing we have to think about is service delivery for these kids. And again, I'll use that word traditionally, but, typically I'll say those big service delivery hours are safe for those totally blind or low vision academic kids who are going to be Braille readers possibly, and you give them maybe 12 or 15 hours a week. I'm not saying that every kid needs that amount of service, because that's a lot for a lot of kids, but typically I'm seeing a lot of kids with CVI who also have complex needs getting maybe a monthly consult, or getting a weekly consult, and that's it, no direct service. Or if they're getting direct service, they're maybe doing 30 minutes a week of tracking activities, or I don't know, that old-fashioned vision stimulation stuff. So really thinking about what really makes sense for service delivery, and not to just generalize and always put them in a consult box, and to think about what they really need. And one of the tools I really like is the Visit from Texas School for the Blind. And it really the reason I love it is because it looks at all areas of the expanded core curriculum and, how important is it for the TVI to teach direct service of any of those areas? And then it helps you figure out the number of hours, and it's a good place to start.
And one of the areas is academic literacy.
It is.
All that. Yeah.
Yep, it is. And I lost my train of thought.
Okay. Service, visit.
Oh, thank you. So that the service is a part of deciding all of that. And then you just, I tend to like to do time with, I do time with all my students, both in the class and both without. And so when I'm in the classroom, I will do things that's happening in the general ed classroom. So I think of one student who I'm working with when I'm in the classroom with him. We are doing the writing time, with the rest of the class, and we're doing some reading using print. And then he's definitely at a point now where he'll say, "I'm getting really tired. Can we go into my quiet room and we'll do some work there?" And then I can see that he's really getting fatigued. So then I'll bring out the Braille and we'll do some Braille activities. And then he'll say, "Oh, this helped. Can I look now?" So I really just do it simultaneously. And kids are just amazing. They're just so resilient and they learn things very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
They really do. They just get it.
They know it works.
They know it works.
For them.
Yeah.
I had a thought in my mind and it went away, but there's some questions that have come up.
Okay.
Should we go there?
Sure.
So a question from a parent here. Okay, I'm going to read it. Let's see. My CVI kid was diagnosed at 12 and started Braille right after, which has been amazing. It has been kind of a tactile gateway for her. She asked us to think of tactile ways to learn in other subjects and areas now too, rather than struggling with vision. She doesn't ever want to lose Braille or be told to go back to being a print reader. I'm curious if you have advice for an older child who wants to advocate for herself at an LMA or educational FVA for their need for Braille to be documented. She has 20/20 acuities and knows people assume she can see print. Thanks.
Well, I think, that's great that she wants to keep it up. And I say keep working on her self-advocacy skills for sure. I think there's so many other ways to integrate it. My question back would be, is she just learning it on the side or is she actually using it in the classroom? Because that's really important to keep up those skills, to find ways to incorporate it into the classroom itself and not just learning it as an aside tool. Because research really has shown that if you do that kids just don't keep those skills. And it's really important to use it more than just when you're having instruction. And then I have, even kids without CVI, I have so many older kids that might be learning Braille, but are doing print for math or other areas, but they have found that using tactile graphics really helps in learning how to read different graphs and charts. And so I think it's worth going there and exploring that as well. Hope that was.
Yeah. Can you share some examples of how Braille will be used or integrated in the classroom for a student who's learning it?
Yep. So if a student's learning it, this is when it's really important to work with the classroom teacher or the team of teachers, whatever age your child is, and to figure out where does it make the most sense for them to be using Braille. And typically people will start in an English class or in literacy class, and they'll start using their Braille there to read very specific books that they may have. And then you might move to something else. But you do it consistently on a daily basis.
So you have a Braille version, whatever text they're learning in English class, for example.
Exactly.
Do some of your students bring in Braille writers or other, there's so much great technology around being able to use Braille, right?
Yeah, beginning Braille users, they all have their Braille writers. There's so many different ways to access Braille now with Braille, refreshable Braille displays that you can connect to your computers. And
so cool.
I'm
excited for this.
Yeah.
Oh man, I keep losing my questions. You can tell it's the end of the day, but yeah, I think it's gone. Okay, so here's some more questions coming in. Oh, they're all coming in. Hey guys. So when reading my son stims saying the letter is a number, I'm seeing if I can get this right. Example, it's not an H, it's a 4. I think it may be his way of taking a visual break every minute or two. Drives everyone nuts, but perhaps it's his audio choice. So like, it sounds like he's purposely misidentifying what he sees as a way to advocate, like,
yeah,
Henry does this too. Like, try to make a joke. Yeah. But it's his audio choice.
And then just switch up the activity.
Yeah.
You have to listen to kids and not force them. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. You get into these power struggles with kids and you try to force them to do something, and then they turn into, behavioral problem kids. They're really not behavioral problems.
When they've been telling you all along. Yeah. This is not okay. Yeah. Somebody's saying this is very helpful. So good. We'll keep talking. Would you recommend that a parent learn Braille? My little guy is still a baby, but I feel like my old tired brain would need a lot of time to learn it. I'm learning it now, and work. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There's a great book from the National Braille Press, Just Enough to Know Better.
Oh,
which is written for parents.
Just Enough to Know Better.
Yeah.
The National Braille Press. Okay. Is there I know you use a curriculum with some of your students called I Am Able, in terms of like teaching Braille to students with complexities, right?
Right.
For example, Henry's an example, and others, others who, and I know here at Perkins, there's individuals who, have motor needs, but they're able to read Braille just with one hand, things like.
There's so many different choices now for Braille programs or guides that we can use. I mean, there's Building on Patterns, which is from APH, and it's actually a complete literacy curriculum. And when I have a student that's in a general ed, like an inclusion class, I may not use the literacy part of it because they're getting everything that they need in their classroom. But the way they teach the Braille is very structured and very sequential, and a lot of kids are successful with that have additional disabilities because it just introduces letters and contractions in a way that is meaningful for kids. And like you mentioned, the I Am Able approach, one of my favorite approaches. I use that with a lot of different kids, and that's when you find meaningful words, vocabulary words for kids, and they start reading. One of my students did that, started reading based on those meaningful vocabulary words, and then the letters and letter sounds started to come after that. So you really just have to try different methods, different.
So you're able to use the I Am Able approach for also print as well?
Yes.
As you're teaching.
And it's not for Braille, but I used it for this one.
I mean, it's an approach to literacy. Yeah. You've talked about, sorry, people are talking. Okay, well, I'm gonna stop. Let me see some questions that just popped up. How do you help a child move from simple sight words to sentences? My son can identify sight words, but struggles transitioning to sentences.
Oh, that's a
big one. I have that question too.
So what I've been doing with one student in particular is you find what really motivates them and what they're really loving. And then you take those sight words that they know individually on cards. And I think it's really important for them to see it in other ways than just on flashcards, because they need to know that's how you write, and that's how you tell stories, and that's how you read stories, as you see all these groups of words. But what I've done is I've created these books based on topics that is really motivating and of high interest to him. and it could be something very simple where, let's say the sight words were like and the and is, and I have simple sentences in the books that use those 3 sight words that have to do with whatever the book is about.
Mm-hmm.
And what I tend to do, at least, and it's very different for all students. So he will open up the book and he'll see a picture and we'll talk about what the picture means. He'll tell me what he sees. And then he turns the page and then there are the words with nothing else around it, just some Braille at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So he might read, I like the trains or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll be pointing to each word as he's reading it. And he knows it goes with the picture that he just saw. And then he'll turn the page and there'll be another picture with the, and I should say with this particular student, there's also a tactile with the picture page. And then we turn that. And then again, there's some more words after that picture. So, sometimes you just want to create these small books, and that actually had more meaning for him rather than just trying to go to sentences, because it just was too much to think about a sentence. But if it's within a book and a story, that's a high motivator, then I think that's when they'll start. At least for the student, that's when he started knowing about sentences and reading sentences.
What I've seen these books and what I appreciate about them is it gives the student a bridge before they even get to the sentence to already create meaning and access experiential memories, right? So by looking at the very familiar 2D picture and it's on a black background, by having that tactile piece to just kind of also help spark that. And then once they get to the sentence, they already have some context there. And context is such a great strategy for so many of our kids with CVI when you can't fully rely on your vision, right? I just can't, I'm doing a sidebar here, but not being able to fully rely on your vision, right? Not being able to trust it for whatever reason, and just being able to have something to buttress what you see, to support what you see and verify it, again, is such a great confidence builder in terms of learning. It's so, I can post some examples of these books, guys. But just also a testament to the multisensory approach, how it supports visual access to print, if that's the approach for the student.
But the student, now, when it's independent reading time or even quiet time in the classroom, they always have 15 minutes of quiet time after lunch.
Mm-hmm.
The student goes to his cubby and gets one of these books, and he will sit and read it for 15 minutes during quiet time, just like all the other kids are doing for 15 minutes for their quiet time. And
is he reading it out loud or just kind of
flipping through it?
Okay.
But does it for 15 minutes.
Yeah, he's engaging with the story, right?
Yeah. And I feel like, like I said, it's so important for them to see the words besides just being on one single card. They need to see it within a sentence. And sometimes, like I said, just going from a word to the sentence without any other meaning around it may be really challenging for some kids. So that's why making short stories could really help in that way. And then I do things when he's reading it. I'll say, okay, now show me the word show me the word train. And he's scanning and he's looking and he's accurately pointing to the words. So he's really starting to learn and recognize and read.
Wow. That's incredible.
And he sees himself as a reader now. So
it's been a struggle for this student. Yeah. When we're thinking about using audio, there are specific ways that's something to teach, right? There are skills to teach.
Yeah.
If you're using audio also as an approach to literacy.
There are. And, you really have to think about that. There's different types of audio. There's some audio where you're just listening. There's some audio where you have the text and it's highlighting the words as it goes through it. There's some audio where you're listening to picture books and you have the book in front of you. So it's really a matter of what doesn't overwhelm the individual student and what makes the most sense. And generally, you do start at a lower speed, an audio speed, so they get used to it. And sometimes some audio is too much right away for some kids. You really have to, it's so individual.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
But there's definitely skills. Yes. And some kids, even when you're doing a read aloud, it's really hard for them to sustain attention, to really listen. So teaching some of those active listening skills is really important. And that could just start with reading out loud a sentence, and then having them talk about that sentence, or having them make a connection to that sentence and expanding upon that a little bit.
They're really chunking it to build that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that recall and comprehension skills. And when you evaluate audio skills, what are you looking at when you're doing your LMA?
You're looking at how accurately they hear things. If they're sustaining visual attention, are they sustaining audio attention? Are they following directions? Are they completing tasks just with verbal instruction? Different things like that.
Yeah, the LMA is such a monster assessment. It's so important for our kids. It's really important. And how do you, so many of our kids with CVI also have ocular conditions, and how do you just figure this out? Because, a lot of our kids have ONH or, strabismus or nystagmus or something else going on.
They do. And that's so complex because they have this dual diagnosis of two very different types of vision impairments. I mean, you have the ocular and the neurological, and you have to find a way just to balance both.
How do you do that?
By trying, by giving choices, by just really listening, by observing, just trying different things slowly, one thing after another, and it usually comes together.
I'm going to keep going. What are some different things that you've tried, and how does it come together, as an example? We just got to know how this works.
I have to think, because it's like I do it so differently for every single kid, but
which that in itself is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, some kids, if their learning media assessment really shows that their vision is a primary channel, and they're really looking, and they're really using their vision, then I'll usually will start there and see how it goes, and then I'll make adjustments vision wise. But very often, especially if not even especially, very often with a lot of kids, you'll start to see eye fatigue or avoidance of looking at materials, or just not being able to sustain their attention for a long time. Then I'll start to try, I won't go to Braille necessarily right away, but I'll start some tactile discrimination activities to see how they respond to that. And then I might add in some auditory. Well, it just depends on the child. Yeah.
You kind of see which one's working. And I know for you collect a lot of data, and the parent asked about how do they help their child advocate for wanting to continue Braille instead of print and things. What is the role of data in your work, and how can we as parent, and what's the connection to then advocating for the best literacy approach? How does data inform that for you?
It informs a lot. I mean, I take data on the progress kids are making with the approaches that we're doing. I take data on when they're accessing something, or when it's challenging for them to access something, and the changes that the team makes to make it more accessible for them. I feel like at home, you can make yourself a simple data sheet that just shows what happens when it's time for homework, or even when the homework is just reading 15 minutes a day, and what happens in that 15 minutes, and just really take notes. And is there a pattern that happens?
Yeah.
And maybe it's too late at night, so try it a little bit earlier, but does the same thing happen? And then present that
That's
to your
helpful.
team. And don't let people shoot you down. Don't let them say it's never going to be right for them, or,
Yeah.
Make them assess to really determine that that's true.
Yeah. Exactly. I am not a fan of absolutes anymore. I hear it so much when it comes to our kids. No, that's not going to work, or this is never going to work for any kid with CVI. It's like, oh my God, there's so many factors. I know that you've taken data on a certain student. Like we hear a lot about we started this conversation about the power of color and, presenting print, and and we know that like things evolve. It's never the same exact. Okay. So this particular student's not the same exact. You've collected a lot of data and you figured out the best way to present print. Like, what was the process there?
Well, typically you start with black and white with black text.
Mm-hmm.
And, I always start with a question like, tell me what you see. And very interestingly enough, a lot of kids have said nothing. I see nothing,
Wow.
which is fascinating to me. So then I start with things like their name and now tell me what you see. And I'll just try different colors. And there's usually one that just stands out.
Yeah. Like that orange for the other student. Yeah.
Orange or green, or one student really, she can only read in purple. So it's just really interesting.
God. And has that changed for that student? Do they start with a certain color and then a purple, or is it always been purple?
She was reading green a little bit, but she just really sees more consistently with the purple. And what's interesting is that she was reading, she needed her font at 66 point font, which is really big. It's not sustainable for a really long time. And then it was able to get a little bit smaller. It got down to a 36 point font. And she's doing okay with it, but she just gets really tired.
Yeah.
After 10 minutes. And she's
yeah. And that's when she moves to Braille.
Yeah.
I know we're at time. Can I ask like one or two more questions? Is that okay? So with Braille, how do you know when it's working and when it's not working, when you've been working with the student with CVI for a while?
So, it's working because they're starting to discriminate what the different Braille symbols are and what they mean. And they're starting to put together some of the words. It's not working when, I think when that's all a challenge for them, and when I've never really had a student that's been resistant to touching it. Sometimes if there's a physical disability, it just might be too taxing in that regard as well.
There's the fatigue on that side, right? Yeah. And there's been, some families who say that as well, that even with CVI, vision is still going to be the strongest sense. And that's what we talk about when we're doing a whole child assessment.
You do. And even if Braille isn't going to be the main road you go on, I still really think it helps. I know it helps just from my experience.
Yeah.
With that vision development and with using the vision, it just gives the brain something that it needs to then that tactile input to the visual input.
Yeah. It's data. After reading Livewired, it was just, the brain doesn't care what input or data. It's just when you have data, no matter what sense it is, the brain is going to respond to it and do something to it. And that's what's going to build connectivity. Do you know is there any research right now about CVI and dual media literacy? Or is that also another need that we have in the field?
I am actually.
Oh.
Okay, so I'm finishing my doctorate, and that will be the focus of my dissertation.
It will? About CVI and dual media literacy?
Yes.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Oh, I can't wait to read that. Wow. Okay. Okay. We can't talk about it anymore. Any highlights you can share or no? Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. That's really exciting. I'm just kind of blown away. Okay. Thank you to all who have joined us today and joined our conversation. We're going to have this post on CVI Now. I kind of want to do a transcript of our conversation, just so there's different ways to access it. You gave a lot of information. You gave a lot of ideas and tools. So I want to make sure to include that. But thank you for taking the time, Tim. I know you do so much for us and our kids in the field, and oh my gosh.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad I could be here to talk to everybody.
I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for watching this event brought to you by CVI Now here at Perkins School for the Blind. Go to cvinow.org to learn more.